Charles chose our 10th wedding anniversary to introduce the woman he'd been seeing, 15 years younger than me, at the very restaurant where he once got on one knee to propose. "Valerie, this is Sierra, and I think it's time we end things, respectfully." I looked at her. Red dress, red lips, eyes like she'd already won. Charles thought I would cry, but I just smiled, pulled out a folder. "Respectfully? Perfect. Read this first." Inside was everything he thought I didn't know. Every deal signed under my name, and one signature he used to ignore. I had waited 3 years for this moment, and if you think that was the biggest twist, keep watching and hit subscribe if you can. My marriage story gets a lot more intense from here. I met Charles in sophomore year. A small HBCU, old classrooms, but big dreams. He sat in the back row, always late, but his eyes missed nothing. We didn't fall in love over glamour. We were both hungry for a future bigger than our poor hometown. After graduation, he launched a tech startup in his mom's garage. I turned down a job in New York to stay, writing strategy decks, pitching investors, building marketing from scratch. No CEO title, but every pitch deck? I designed it. Every brand story, written by me. We were a team. No need for too many words. And I used to think, that was love. Now I see. Maybe it was just the foundation of an empire that only one of us got to put their name on. I once got a full scholarship offer from Yale. One of the first years they interviewed black students from Southern public schools. My essay was called "Sharper Than Any Senior's Work," a professor said. Top of my class, flawless record. But the rejection letter came with a single line I'll never forget. "We're afraid your profile doesn't align with our academic culture." They didn't say it out loud, but I knew. It wasn't my grades, it was my skin, my Southern accent, the wool dress I wore to the interview, instead of an Ivy League coat. I folded that letter, buried it in the bottom of my bag, then walked toward a different kind of life, not because I wasn't good enough, but because they weren't ready for me. Just like someone else, years later, wasn't ready for me to stand beside them. Even after I helped them build an empire. I once chose a bright white wedding dress, not for tradition. I wanted to start everything with clarity. But 2 weeks before the wedding, Charles' mother asked to see me privately. She rested her hand gently on my shoulder, her voice calm, almost sweet. "Valerie, in our family, pure white is traditional, but ivory is more elegant. Maybe you should wear ivory." I didn't argue, didn't ask why. I just nodded, took off the dress, folded it neatly, and handed it back to the clerk, then chose the ivory one hanging beside it. Back then, I thought that was grace. Now I know. It was the first time I bent away from myself, in silence. The wedding photo hung in our living room for 8 years. Everyone said I looked beautiful, but all I saw was a bride who didn't get to choose her color. I once dreamed of being a writer, not famous, just able to write in my own voice. By sophomore year, I had my first manuscript, half poetry, half essays. Stories of women like my mother, my aunt, the ones who did more than they said and hurt so deeply no one even noticed. But once Charles started the company, I put it all on hold. First for a year, then 2, then 10. I opened my own agency, handling all the media for his company. No one hired me because I was Valerie. They hired me because I was Charles Monroe's wife. I had a room in the attic. No one ever went inside. Inside were unfinished paintings, an unsent manuscript, a dusty old typewriter. I told people, I just don't have time to write. But truth is, I no longer had permission to write like myself. I didn't find everything out at once. The signs came quietly, slowly. Charles started flipping his phone face down when I entered the room. New messages only said, "Content hidden." I'd ask, and he'd laugh. "Just business emails." Some nights he came home late. His shirt faintly smelled of perfume. Not mine. Not the scent he used to love. I tried hugging him like before. He turned away, said he was tired. One night, I cooked his favorite meal. He said he had dinner plans with a client. But the receipt I found later showed only 2 people. I didn't say a word. Didn't question. Didn't cry. I just recorded everything. The restaurant, the time, the perfume, the barely legible name on the bill. And I began to understand. Silence now was no longer surrender. It was strategy. That day, I cleaned the guest room. The housekeeper was off. A small, ordinary task. but it led me to what no one thought would be found so easily. In Charles's suit jacket pocket was a hotel keycard. Not just any hotel, the hotel where we celebrated our first anniversary, the presidential suite, top floor, river view. I held that key for a long time. No shaking, no crying, no dramatic smashing, like in movies, just a quiet ache, old as the disappointment I'd learned to hide for years. I picked up my phone, scrolled to a name I never thought I'd need. Lisa M., divorce attorney. I need to see you, and I need absolute confidentiality. From that moment on, I was no longer the betrayed wife. I became the opponent he never saw coming. Lisa didn't look like a lawyer. She looked like someone who'd walked through fire and no longer feared being burned. She didn't ask if I was sure. She only asked, "What do you have?" I gave her the keycard, some receipts, screenshots of strange messages. Lisa nodded slowly. "We'll need more than this. If he's hiding assets, we have to prove it before he wipes it clean." The next day, she introduced me to Robert Chen, a forensic accountant with gray hair and eyes that cut through words. He didn't ask about love, just about ownership, bank accounts, investments under whose name? "Men like your husband," he said, "rarely just cheat. They prepare to disappear and leave you with nothing." I nodded, not surprised. For the first time in years, I felt like I was taking back control. 3 weeks later, Robert called me into his office. No small talk. He opened his laptop, flipping through files like peeling away a familiar mask. Cayman Islands account, opened in your second year of marriage. Florida property under an unrelated name. Shell company, moved cash in, pulled it all out. I stared at the account numbers, the paperwork, the signatures, each line cut deeper, not because of the money, but because of the planning. He didn't just betray me, he made a plan, to leave me with nothing. Robert looked up. "Valerie, this wasn't an accident. He's been preparing for years." I said nothing. I just remembered the night we started his company. We swore, no secrets. Well, turns out, one of us kept that promise, the other kept everything else. This wasn't just about cheating. Robert found suspicious transactions in the company books. At first, small things. A designer bag, spa visits, fancy dinners. Then, a penthouse under someone else's name, a brand new sports car, and a black card account for Sierra. Every charge traced back to Charles's company. Not his money. Shareholder money. The money his team worked nights and weekends for. He didn't just lie to me, he betrayed everyone who believed he was a respectable founder. Part of me wanted to confront him right away, but a bigger part wanted to wait until he couldn't deny a thing. What about you? If you found out your spouse was using company money to support a mistress, what would you do first? Text, call, or stay silent, like I did? Robert handed me a recording. He didn't say a word, just pressed play, and let the sound speak. It was Sierra's voice, laughing. "She's sitting in that mansion like some kind of queen, while Charles does everything. Who does she think she is? Royalty?" I listened to it 3 times, not because I was surprised, but because it was familiar. I'd heard that tone before. Behind the compliments, beneath the praise, behind every "you're amazing," was an unspoken accusation. "You're just the billionaire's wife." But this time was different. It didn't come from a stranger. It came from the woman he placed above me. No need for commentary. I saved the file, labeled it Key Evidence. When someone insults you behind your back, that's reflex. But when they mock you while sitting next to your betrayer, that's war. That night, I went up to the attic. The room no one entered but me. The unfinished painting still sat on the easel. The brush strokes frozen mid-motion, like I had been for years. I sat down. No lights, no music, just silence, and a few quiet tears on cold wooden table. I had tried to keep everything intact, the family, the reputation, the man I once believed was my soulmate, and in return, I was laughed at, betrayed, dismissed. But in that darkness, there was no rage. Only one clear truth: I had nothing left to lose. I wiped my face, stood up, reopened the old folder, marked each file, organized every piece of evidence. If they thought I'd stay silent forever, they picked the wrong woman. That night, I didn't cry. I started planning how to take back everything that was mine. Robert sent over a new report, and the first line made me go still. Sierra Matthews, Executive Director, Bloomrise Foundation. I had never heard of it, but their account received monthly payments from one of Charles's shell companies. Same amount, same date, every time. Robert flipped the file open. Fake consulting contracts, unverifiable donation lists, nonprofit registration full of holes. "This isn't a real charity," he said. "It's a front, a laundering scheme. So clean it almost looks legal." Sierra wasn't just the other woman. She was a piece of Charles's financial darkness. I almost laughed. They used the word nonprofit to sanitize pure greed. I saved every file, added a new folder, overlapping crimes. Because now, this wasn't just personal, it was criminal. Monday morning, I wore a white blouse, tied my hair back, and opened my laptop. The files were ready. 4 main folders: offshore accounts, shell companies, money laundering trails, company funds used for personal expenses, email, subject line, confidential, evidence of securities fraud and misappropriation, Monroe Tech Holdings. Recipient, SEC Enforcement Division. My hands didn't shake. I didn't hesitate. Just clicked send. Like opening a window to let the light in. Then I called Lisa. "We're ready," I said. "There's only one thing left. Let Charles walk into this himself." I checked the clock. If Robert was right, Charles's accounts would be frozen within 72 hours. What do you think he'll do when he realizes his empire is collapsing minute by minute? Trust me, you don't want to miss that scene. That night, my phone rang. It was my mother. Same steady, soft voice as always. "I just wanted to hear your voice, baby." I was about to lie, say I was fine, but my throat closed up. She paused, then said, "You know, when you were little, I cried once. Not because you lost, but because I knew. You weren't born to follow the crowd. You were born to lead." I bit my lip. "A woman like you, Valerie, isn't meant to live under someone else's name. You've got your own fire. Don't let anyone put it out." I closed my eyes. Her words fell like rain on dry earth. She didn't know what was happening. But somehow, she always called right when I needed her most. Tomorrow, I would face Charles. And this time I wouldn't step back. I wouldn't shrink. I wouldn't ask permission to rise. I stood in front of my closet, quietly scanning the rows of dresses. I didn't pick white. I didn't pick ivory. I didn't pick the elegant ones my ex-mother-in-law used to call appropriate for the role. I chose a fitted black dress, square neckline, just long enough to walk without bowing, red lipstick. The color I used to be told was too bold. I applied it slowly, precisely, no tremble. And last, my grandmother's old beaded necklace, faded glass beads, worn from time. She wore it to every community meeting at the black church, where every woman stood tall in their truth. I clasped it around my neck, looked at myself in the mirror, no longer a wife, no longer a shadow behind anyone. Tonight, I would walk in as myself, fully, unapologetically, unshakably. I arrived exactly on time, not early, not late. Charles and Sierra were already seated at our old table, the one he chose to propose to me 8 years ago. Same candles, same wine. But everything tasted different now. Sierra gave me a cold smirk, scanning me head to toe, like I was some outdated piece of furniture. Charles nodded, overly polite. "Valerie, I'm glad you came. There's a few things we need to discuss." They looked at me like they held the upper hand. Calm, smug, almost pitying. I pulled out the chair, sat down, smiled. They didn't know the countdown had begun, and every word they were about to say would only bring them closer to the edge. As for me, I just had to sit back and let the truth do its work. You wonder what happened when I placed the folder on the table? Just wait. Charles set down his wine glass, voice smooth like a well-rehearsed speech. "Valerie, I think we should end this peacefully. No one wants to hurt anyone." I looked straight into his eyes. No nod, no shake, just quietly reached into my bag and pulled out a neatly clipped folder, placed it on the table, slid it across, said nothing. Sierra raised an eyebrow. Charles froze slightly. "What's this?" I kept smiling, eyes still on the candle between us. "Just some papers to read before we end things peacefully." He opened it. First pages, bank statements, real estate transfers, evidence of company funds being siphoned. No one spoke for a few seconds, but I knew. This was the pivot. Silence has a sound. And in this moment, it was louder than any accusation. Charles flipped the page. Photos of the penthouse, the one under someone else's name, where Sierra lived. Next, hidden Cayman account, his signature. Sierra leaned in. Her eyes darted. Charles tried to keep calm. Then, wire transfers from Monroe Tech to Bloomrise, the fake nonprofit. A direct hit to the image he'd built as a noble entrepreneur. Next page, photos from private dinners, Sierra stepping out of a hotel key still in her hand. Final page, the audio recording. I had marked the important line in red. He pressed play. She thinks she's some kind of queen. Sierra went pale. Charles gripped the edge of the table. No more excuses. That was the moment they realized. I hadn't come to beg. I came with truth, and the preparation of a woman with nothing left to lose. Sierra sat frozen, her hands clenched around the napkin, her face drained of all color. Charles kept his head down, eyes locked on the documents like he could burn them away with a stare. I lifted my glass of water. Calm. Turned to Sierra, voice even, cold. "You think you won because you stole my husband?" She didn't respond. I tilted my head. No rage in my voice, only clarity. "No, sweetheart. You didn't win because I no longer need a husband to know my worth." I set my glass down. Quiet. "But you still need a man just to have a seat at this table?" No one replied. No one smiled. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the sound of truth landing like fingernails dragging across glass. I stood, adjusted my grandmother's necklace. This wasn't just a victory. This was freedom. Sierra started to lose control. "Charles, you said everything was safe. You told me I wasn't involved." She kept repeating it, like the more she said it, the more it would be true. Charles reached out, trying to calm her. "Just take a breath, okay? Valerie, there's no need to blow this up. I'm sure we can explain everything." I didn't respond. I just watched them, like a bad play unraveling its final act. Sierra stood up, hands shaking, digging through her purse. "I need to call my lawyer. I'm not involved. I'm just the woman he loves." Charles tried to grab her hand, whispering something, but even his voice cracked. For the first time, I saw Charles no longer in control, no longer the composed CEO in front of boardrooms. Now, he was just a man, watching power slip from his hands, and realizing no one believed him anymore. I stood up. The soft scrape of my chair against the floor echoed just enough to turn heads. Waiters paused. People glanced from nearby tables. Even the bartender looked over. Charles looked up, nervous. "Valerie, don't make a scene. You want everyone staring?" I placed my hand on the table. My voice, light as air. "I don't have to make a scene." Then I locked eyes with him. Slow, deliberate. "You created this scandal all by yourself." No one laughed. No one whispered. Just a silence. Tense as water just before it shatters. I glanced around the room. Once a place of our best memory. Now it was the scene of an ending. Witnessed by strangers. And if anyone wondered who was right or wrong, I didn't need to say a word. The evidence spoke for itself. I turned and walked away. No looking back. No last words. Each step on the tile floor felt like closing a chapter. No one stopped me. No one called my name. Charles sat still. Sierra clenched her phone. The restaurant held its breath. As I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. A message from Lisa. "SEC confirmed file received. Priority review underway." I took a deep breath. No fireworks, no collapsing glass. Just a short message, right on time. But enough to know the first domino had fallen. No yelling, no revenge speeches, just the quiet unraveling of the truth, one layer at a time. I pushed open the restaurant door. Tonight, I didn't need a grand victory, because I knew, by tomorrow, they would start to lose. The next morning, every financial news outlet broke the story. Monroe Tech Holdings drops 32% amid CEO investigation. SEC steps in. Shareholders call for Charles Monroe's removal. Social media exploded. One post showed Charles at a recent event with the caption, "From power to scandal, how fast can it fall?" The company website changed overnight. Charles's name vanished from the executive page, and a cold statement appeared. "We are cooperating fully with federal authorities." I didn't need to say a word. Victory doesn't always come in loud declarations. Sometimes, it comes in the consequences the guilty finally have to face. Have you ever stayed silent, just to watch someone reveal who they truly are? If this story made you feel stronger, share it with a woman who needs to hear it. And don't forget to follow this channel, because this journey is just beginning. Sierra vanished from social media within 24 hours. Instagram, locked. TikTok, no more young CEO girl boss videos. Bloomrise, the fake nonprofit, quietly took down its website. A small article buried at the bottom of a local page. Sierra Matthews returns to her hometown in Alabama. Family declined to comment. No more penthouse, no more luxury car, no more whispered sweet nothings, just a small house in Montgomery. The one she once swore she'd never return to. Now, the only place left that would take her back. She once called me a washed-up queen. It turns out, the only one who pushed herself off the throne was her. I didn't need revenge, didn't need cruel words. The silence of the entire world was the clearest judgment of all. Early morning. Ocean breeze drifted across the porch. I sat on the balcony of my small gray-white cottage, a warm cup of tea in hand, sunlight spilling across the open notebook, the first page of my manuscript. Title, Mrs. No More. I was no longer someone's wife, no longer hiding behind another man's name. I was me, a woman with a story she no longer needs permission to tell. Every word I wrote was a healed scar finding its voice. No blame, no regret, just truth, laid gently onto the page, as calm and certain as the woman writing it. Waves whispered in the distance. The curtain danced in the breeze. Not a perfect life, but one I reclaimed, with my own hands. I wasn't writing for others anymore. I was writing to remind myself I came back home. 1 year later, I cut the ribbon on an organization called Her Rebuild. Not a flashy office, just a renovated red brick building, paid for with money I earned after the divorce. Every week we run classes, personal finance, legal counseling, resume rewrites, for Black women. Those forgotten after broken marriages. I look at them, some holding babies, some still teary but refusing to leave class. I see myself in their eyes, tired, worn, but never out of hope. I didn't want to just tell my story. I wanted to help them write theirs. And if you're still here reading this, remember, rebuilding doesn't start where you fell. It starts the moment you decide to rise. I stood on stage in the auditorium of my old HBCU, the one that once denied me a scholarship for being culturally unfit. This time, I returned in a different role, not as a student, not as someone's wife, but as a speaker and survivor. Below me, hundreds of young women listened closely. Some took notes, some nodded. I took a deep breath, then began, I'm not telling this story for revenge. I'm telling it so you won't have to repeat it. The hall went quiet. I once thought love was enough, that if I sacrificed enough, he wouldn't leave. But the truth is, love isn't about losing yourself. I paused, looked into their faces. Each of you deserves a life led by your own hand. Don't wait to be chosen. Choose yourself, first. The camera light turned red. The studio lights softened across my face. I looked straight into the lens, like I was looking into the eyes of another woman, alone in a dark room, watching this. I didn't need a script, only the truth. If you've ever forgotten who you are, it's time to remember. I let the silence hold, gave the listener space to feel it. You weren't born to be defined by a title, a man, or a failure. I once thought I was just a shadow behind a last name. Then I smiled gently. But you know what? The name you carried, before you became someone's wife, was already strong enough to write a whole life. It's time to take it back. I walked slowly, alone. No need to look back, no need to mourn what was lost. I'd learned how to let go, so my hands were light enough to lift myself. I once thought divorce was the end. A name crossed out, a family undone. But now I know, I didn't divorce. I was reborn. From the ashes, I gathered pieces of myself, not to patch up the old me, but to build someone new, brighter, sharper, unbent. If you've ever felt like just the leftover part of someone else, remember this: you are the whole story, and the next chapter is yours alone. If anything I've said makes you feel a little less alone, share this video, follow this channel, because we, the women who rise, will always have each other.